Set the record.
The rabbi's got two doggies that occasionally make an appearance in class.
Yes.
Our dog might join too.
There's one of them. Okay.
This is Lily. Skinny. And this is Skinny.
That's Skinny.
Woof.
Hi, Lee.
Hi, Reva.
Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. As a reminder, let us be respectful of others and remember to remute yourself if you are not speaking. Let us begin with the blessing before study. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam
asher yeshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu Yisrael Torah.
Blessed are you, our God,
Ruler of
ruler of the
the world,
world,
who has
who has sanctified us in your commandments.
and commanded us to engage in the word of Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Everyone, Rabbi, it's all yours, my friend.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Julie and Bert. Hello to everyone else. Bonnie has been busy baking pumpkin challah for Thanksgiving. And so I'm very excited. Friday night, we're having a commemorative event for Rabbi Abrams. And so one of his daughters is going to speak, and the canner and others. And we have another conversion for Rochelle. And so she's going to be quite interesting. And so that should be an interesting Friday night. Last week, we talked about the rape of rape of Dinah, correct? And that was a very difficult session because we're not sure exactly what happened and who to blame and what was wrong and what the consequences were. This week, we have another rather salacious event. And there's a series of these salacious events. It seems almost like God was hoping that the Torah would be made into a mini series or a movie, and wanted to stick in enough controversy and sex and scandal to make sure that that happened. So we're in Paragon. How do you measure loyalty and success? Page 97. These were, I hope Bert and Julie, do you have this? Oh, you look at that. Look at that. And you're from Chicago?
She's a teacher.
Look at that. They're with us 3 minutes. They've already got all the downloads and they're all set and they printed it out and wow. So hopefully everyone else has that as well. Any comments or issues as we start? Lorraine, Bernie.
You know I'm going to have a comment, but it occurs to me if the book of Genesis were published as a separate book, given a different title, there would be crowds at the school board meetings demanding that it be removed from the shelves.
Well, it still should if you read the content. It's clearly not appropriate for lower school. And middle school, not pretty questionable. There's no question about that. Pam?
I'm just surprised a lot of this hasn't been made into movies.
There was, of course, some successful movies based on Moses, but and Richard Gere made a movie about King David quite a few years ago that I never watched. It got very bad reviews, but not too many movies about these. Marcia.
Joseph he made it big with his musical,
Oh, it's true. It is
Andrew
true.
Lloyd Webber, yeah.
And he didn't get a penny in royalties, by the way. Yeah, well, isn't that the pits? Okay, well, who'd like to read page 97, bottom left-hand column, Parak Gimel, how do you measure loyalty and success? Don't everyone volunteer at once. Okay, Nan.
Just had to unmute. Okay. In the story of Tamar and Judah, Tamar acts like a prostitute and easily seduces Judah. By contrast, a prophet's wife seeks to seduce Joseph, but fails. In her disappointment and anger, she accuses Joseph of raping her, and Potiphar throws Joseph into jail. Why did Joseph resist the flirtiness of Potiphar's wife? No one knows. No one was at home. Potiphar's wife is reported to have been beautiful and very much attracted to Joseph. So why did he turn her down? Why did he risk making her hostile and losing all that he had achieved? According to an explanation of the Sifra, a commentary on Numbers and Deuteronomy, edited in the 4th century CE, Joseph would not let his strong sexual desires get the best of him. He remained in control of himself. As a righteous person, he told himself not to give in to the temptations Potiphar's wife was putting before him.
Okay, thank you, Nan. All right, I don't think I even have to ask any questions or make any comments. I think you can just jump right in here and, give me some response to the situation. Riva or Pam? Okay, Steve.
Sounds like to me another soap opera.
Marcia.
Well, the next paragraph,
You muted, Marcia.
and the next paragraph says that she was his boss's wife and that he resisted because of that. So it's makes him less of a perfect person, I guess. Okay.
Well, I mean, is this really a question? I mean, he's working for this, he's a servant, right, in the household of this important Egyptian guy and his wife. The Egyptian guy's not home, but is coming home later that evening. Do you really, I mean, do you want to get involved with these things? I mean, I don't know. Bert.
You have to
Yeah.
unmute.
You have to unmute.
But I was, I'm sorry. He spent time in the pit. He saw the dark side of life. I mean, he was, sold into slavery, and I don't think he wants to go back there. I think he's pretty happy having a life of not leisure, but a decent life.
So he doesn't want to get in any more trouble. So, okay, so, and she's married, there presumably were other women around that he could date that weren't married, right? That, so I don't understand the question. Like, it seems obvious that you don't have to be somebody of high moral integrity to not get involved with a married woman who is basically your boss, that you're the slave of. It just doesn't, it doesn't contribute to what Bert was saying is just, let's get my life back on track. Pam.
Well, some truths are universal. Not a good idea now, not a good idea then.
Yeah. Right. So, and today it might be your boss at work's wife, but then this wasn't just a boss. He was like the controller. It was much worse then, So But I don't know if he expected that she would retaliate like that, right? Okay, other comments? D, Babette, Nan. Lorraine, Bernie, Benita. Or B, Riva.
Universal themes.
All right. Okay, Marcia, you want to read on page 97 another interpretation?
In another interpretation, the Tanshuma explains that Joseph resisted her because he took an oath never to approach his master's wife. Putting words in Joseph's mouth, the author of the Tanshuma writes that Joseph said to himself, "How can I do such an evil thing as to sin against God by breaking my oath?" Do we want to do the box?
Yeah, let's do the box in this case. The first quote is from the Zohar, so it deals with mysticism. The second quote is from a Dean Steinsaltz, who just recently passed away, was a very famous Israeli mystic.
A great hero. Is there among the virtuous a greater hero than a young 17-year-old surrounded by loose women who manages to keep himself from them? Because he did so, Joseph was rewarded when much later his children were blessed with the words of his father, Jacob.
It sounds like such a dangerous situation. The poor boy surrounded by loose women.
Maybe it was a land of loose women. I don't know. Okay, Joseph was a tzaddik, a righteous man. The chief argument in favor of his being called a tzaddik is drawn by the climax of the story of the wife of Potiphar, whose temptations he firmly resisted. Other interpreters, however, do not view Joseph in such a positive way. They raise serious questions about his behavior. Rashi says that as soon as Joseph was appointed by Potiphar to a position of importance, he began to eat and drink excessively like all the rest of the Egyptian ruling class. He curled his hair and lived lavishly. He forgot all about being a slave and assimilated into idolatry and the loose sexual practices of Egyptian society.
All right, stop. Is this really a condemnation? I mean, isn't that what you do when you assimilate into a culture and you get a good job? You have to start dressing the part. You have to, if you come from poverty and you get a job on Wall Street, you have to buy some expensive suits and start lunching at the fancy restaurants. And isn't this just part of assimilating? I mean, isn't this what you're supposed to do? Bernie, D, okay, Babette, and then Bernie.
Dressing is one thing, but acting against moral principles is another.
Okay, so some of what he did is explainable, but some of it not.
Yes.
All right, Bernie.
I like the way Rashi makes up stuff. And, I look at this as when in Rome, do as the Romans do, especially when you just got out of jail.
So you agree with me that most of his behavior, at least, or some of his behavior is understandable. All right, Bert or Julie? Remember that you'd have to unmute. Okay, Bonnie?
This is my thought, is if Joseph had not partaken of the culture that he was now involved with, would not the rest of the higher ups take that he disapproved of their behavior because he was not doing what they were doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you're being accepted into a group and you blatantly show them that you don't respect their practices, it's gonna, yeah, I think Bonnie's making a very good point that further, confirms that at least a lot of what he did was understandable. but there's always someone who will refuse. And, I guess, if you could argue that the ultra-Orthodox in America that refuse to go along with any of the practices are the ones that are still going to be here in 300 years. But normally people want to integrate into the society and accept the norms, among other reasons, because they want to be accepted, as Bonnie says. Okay, I think I lost Bert. And so Riva, Nan, Dee. Okay,
There's a
Julie
difference
Julie
between,
has her hand up too.
okay, Babette and then Julie.
there's a difference between a moral value, quite frankly. I once worked at a place, I lived in Puerto Rico for quite a while. You have to dress the part or act the part. But if they're on the take, I don't have to be on the take. And I got a marvelous letter of recommendation afterwards about how honest I was. They all knew I wasn't doing it. So your outward appearance and your acting and that kind of thing. But if it's a shanda to steal, don't do it.
So there's certain things that you can and should integrate with, and there's certain things that you
Absolutely.
not. Okay, Bert or Julie? Julie.
I think it was interesting what Elie Wiesel said, that it takes two, and that, he allowed himself to get into that situation, and that he kind of provoked the situation by going in there and being a little bit of a tease. And it was only at the very last minute that he put a stop to the seduction. So he wasn't totally pure in the situation.
Aha. So he was flirting. And
Right.
then when she wanted to consummate, he said, no, I can't do that. And that's what made her so mad. If he
Right.
had not gotten involved at all, she would have just thought it's another one of the help. She would
Right.
barely have known his name, but he kind of flirted with her to get advantages and to become a big shot. And then,
Right.
oh man.
Yeah, good point.
But, he was just doing what was in his interest, I guess. And, he put the
Mhm.
line in a certain place.
I mean, I know as a woman, I wouldn't go into a man's house alone unless I had something on my mind. And
Uh-huh.
so I'm thinking a man would probably be the same, think the same way.
What if he told you were going to meet his roommate?
Well, there's the
I don't know.
concept.
I don't know. I just don't think that Joseph was so pure. I just don't think he was. It took her to say, when she chased him from room to room, and it says it was only when they reached the bed that Joseph began to question the morality of what he was about to do. And then he said, I'm afraid your husband will discover the affair. That was only when, and she said, well, then I'll murder him. And then he was nervous. He said, well, I can't only be an adulterer, but also an accomplice to murder. And that's what made him nervous. I mean, he was pretty seriously thinking about it. He wasn't so pure and high and mighty. I mean, it's good that he stopped it at the last moment, but, he had, he came pretty close to falling over the edge.
And it's really literally falling over the edge, because you could see how these things could cascade, right? So, as Julie's saying, we're not just talking about flirting anymore. We're talking about sex. We're not just talking about sex, we're talking about adultery. We're not just talking about adultery, we're talking about potential murder, conspiracy to murder and murder. You know, this is clearly the script for a movie with Michael Douglas. D?
Well, I agree with Julie, other than in the end, because in life, it always can be a temptation. Everybody has that attribute within them. But if you have the switch, the choice becomes a choice. And if you have a switch that says in your mind, well, this is not the pathway to go. So in a sense, I see him as a righteous man because he did, no matter what he did, and he did lead her on, and that's not unusual in life with men and women. There must have been a physical attraction. She was very beautiful, but he didn't do it. He stopped because his morality and his value system clicked in some form. So to me, that shows a righteous choice. I be.
We'll read a little further just to read what Julie already mentioned. Marcia?
Let's make sure here. Modern writer Elie Wiesel, I guess it is, raises a serious question about Joseph's character when he comments, one does not provoke a woman unless one wants to. One does not love a woman or a man against one's will. Every relationship is a two-way affair. From Messengers of God. Adding to the suspicions about Joseph's behavior with Potiphar's wife, Rav Samuel says that Joseph deliberately entered the house in order to be seduced by her. And Rabbi Abin says that she chased him from room to room and from chamber to chamber until she brought him to her bed. It was only when they reached her bed, according to several interpreters, that Joseph began to question the morality of what he was about to do. According to one version taught by the rabbis, Joseph is portrayed as saying to Potiphar's wife, I am afraid that your husband will discover our affair. She answered him, then I will murder him. Joseph was shocked and answered, then I will not only be an adulterer, but also the accomplice to a murder.
All right, so do you think that this is a general rule that one bad deed can lead to worse bad deeds? Or is this an unusual situation? So if I steal a piece of chocolate brownie from Cheesecake Factory, is that going to lead to a high-speed chase and then I'm going to run people over and shoot the mailman? Man.
I think it is possible. We see it very often with people that are arrested for crimes. I mean, look at the man, I'm not going to call him a gentleman, that was arrested for the kid who ran down all those people during a holiday parade. He had, what they say, 16 arrests since 1999, and just a week before he was let out on $1,000 bond, and he was running from a domestic, he said it was a domestic dispute, trying to avoid police, but it seems it was like a snowball. One thing led to another and another, and he is a habitual, criminal. We see that now. I don't know, in other instances, there are kleptomaniacs, people that will steal, go into stores and steal all the time and try to get away with it. But I think it's fairly common in certain situations.
Anyone else? Yes, Pam.
I think for a lot of people, if they got away with it once, their attitude is going to be, well, I got away with it, and why should I not do it again or do something similarly thing? And so they keep going and they progress from there. So.
And you try to escalate each time because you got away with the small stuff. So
right.
I'd start by stealing one one slice of cheesecake brownie from Cheesecake Factory, then I'll try to steal a whole cheesecake. Then I'll try to steal like their whole production for a day. And then, it works like that.
I think some people think that way, that, no one cares. I'm going to keep doing it. and do more of it.
And why steal $50 when steal $500? Bonnie and then Nan.
In that specific case regarding Joseph, I think, first of all, if you were to flirt and continue to have a relationship with your boss's wife that is going to lead to more than just flirting, unless one of them stop it. I think if he had gone to bed with this woman, that eventually, especially if they had what they would call, oh, this is wonderful, this is so special, it would lead to one of them killing the husband.
Wow.
Because the wife would not want her husband to know that she was having an affair with Joseph. Joseph would not want the man to know that he was having an affair with his wife, because both of these possibilities could end in the husband killing Joseph or killing his wife. So, I mean, this even happens today, where you read in the newspaper where somebody was having an affair and then the spouse was killed because they didn't want him to find out, or whatever the situation is. But that's just bad news. I mean, it's not the same thing as stealing a piece of cheesecake. Or what did you say, brownie cheesecake? That's not the same thing, because if you were hungry, that's one thing. But if you just took it just because you wanted it, it might not have tasted that good.
I think it might taste better.
But, I'm sorry, what?
I think it might taste better because I had to use my ingenuity to steal it rather than just buy it.
Says the person that takes a bite and then wraps things up in tinfoil and puts them in the bottom of his freezer.
Okay. Who is next? Nan and then Marcia.
Well, I was going to piggyback off of what Pam had said, that yes, people get away with things and so they will try more, but then there are some people who are so afraid of what the possible consequences are that they don't do it, that
Right.
they won't go into temptation. And I would like to think that there are more people that will think like that so that they won't become criminals. But there's another side to that as well.
So there's people that won't do anything bad because they
Well,
don't want to get in
Well,
trouble.
it's like, well, if I steal, if I go in and, as teenagers, and I know I had a group of friends that said, let's go see if we could steal a bottle of nail polish from the 5 and dime or whatever. I never did, because I was so fearful that the consequences could really be a detriment to my further education, but I was also more afraid of my mother's wrath and the punishment from her. And that was in the back of my mind for a lot of things when I was growing up, because my mother that was the way my mother was. And so it prevented me from getting into a lot of crazy situations that might have had a very lifelong effect on me. And it was a different time then. And, I never snuck out of the house. People, my kids called me a goody two shoes because they said, well, didn't you do any of that? Nope. I said, you weren't raised in grandma's house.
All right. Marcia and then maybe Bert. Marcia first.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Well, the story that Nan reminds me, I walked out of Woolworths when I was a kid with a Dumbo, little stuffed Dumbo, and my mother said, "Where did you get this?" I don't know, I took it out of the store. She marched me back in the store and I had her apologize and whatever. I don't know if she bought me the Dumbo or I don't even remember, but I remember I didn't, from when I was little, I did not get away. And I knew that I would be the one to get caught anyhow, so. But the third possibility was that Joseph could have gotten killed, or he could have killed her. I mean, there's all kinds of ramifications that could have happened from this thing. That's what I was.
Right. All of them bad, really.
Yeah, so all of them bad, yes.
Bert?
Am I off?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in the opposite perspective. I believe it says somewhere in Judaism, I don't know where it says this, that one mitzvah leads to more mitzvot.
Right.
So it's also true on the other end.
Yeah, it's from the Talmud, and it's mitzvah goreret mitzvah. A mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. Avera goreret avera, and a bad deed leads to another bad deed.
Right, yeah.
So yes, it's a very well-known statement in Talmud. I don't know exactly where it is, but I could find it pretty quickly. But yeah, and you think, and Julie, you think that's true?
Yes, I really do, because I know that when I start doing good things, I think it's interesting that the Talmud says that, because as a teacher, I learned in learning theory about positive and negative reinforcement. And when I'm positively reinforced for doing a good deed, that feels so good that I want to do more.
And when you're negatively
And when I'm negatively reinforced for doing something bad, it doesn't feel good. So I don't want to do more.
She's never bad.
What did you say?
She's never bad.
She's never bad. I see these little white wings on her back. But you don't, but Bert, right?
Yes.
You don't have wings.
No. I'm too busy holding the pedestal up.
All right, I guess, you can't have two people in a couple that are both
No.
it would. So Bert, what is your approach to this? Do you think that
I absolutely agree that, one lie leads to another lie. You just keep covering things up, and sooner or later it pops.
so little things that lead to bigger things?
Absolutely.
But not in every case. Can't there be people who just steal candy bars and they never move up the criminal ladder?
I suppose there are.
Pam?
Is there a reason why the patriarchs stop at Jacob and they don't extend into Joseph or any of other Jacob's descendants?
That's a great question.
And
I can't really answer that. I don't know. But yeah, there's a clear Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and certainly Isaac doesn't appear to be a particularly distinguished patriarch, and yet he is considered one of the patriarchs. And then Jacob has 12 sons and one daughter, as we know, including Joseph, who appears to be the heir of the covenant, but Joseph is not considered a patriarch. I don't really know why. That's a good question. Any suggestions, Pam?
I think we could do a future adult education to get into that.
passing the book.
Well, Riva and I were just talking yesterday about what to do for February. It looks like I'm going to Israel in January, so I'll be gone for a few weeks.
Great.
Including for a 1-week rabbinic conference there. And I'm
Good decision.
I'm going to go early, and I'll see friends I haven't seen in more than 20 years.
Wonderful.
So, but in February, we're looking for a good course, and we're trying to figure out, because the ethics of the sages was a smaller enrollment, and we want, it's more exciting when you have more people. Okay, next, who'd like to comment, or are we ready to? Riva, and who else wanted to speak?
I thought Eli Wiesel's comment was very interesting, that both parties are responsible. But I would raise the question of whether both partners in every case are equally responsible. I think there's certainly situations where one person is much more responsible than the other. And I can't resist, I guess, sharing one small example. I take into consideration that the gentleman was 17 years old. When I was 16, I went to my first college party. And one of the men at the party invited me to come upstairs to see his Phi Beta Kappa key.
Mm. That would call-
And
Calling it now.
and fortunately, I had somebody with me who had more common sense than I did, who said, don't do it. It's a bad idea. But I think I give a little bit of slack to young people who are very unsophisticated. Maybe not in this case, but in general, I think the power balance is not always equal. There can be a real inequality of power in situations like this, where I think one person bears more responsibility for their behavior than the other.
And here there was a very extreme imbalance of power. He was a slave,
Right,
and she was the owner. So
Right.
Very, very extreme imbalance. Okay, Marcia, you want to keep reading?
Sure. Elsewhere, I think that's right. Elsewhere, the rabbis say that Joseph looked up from the bed where he and Potiphar's wife were embracing and saw that she had placed a sheet over the head of an idol hanging on the wall. Suddenly, he realized what a mistake he was making. You have placed a sheet over the idol because you are ashamed of what you're about to do, he said to her. How much more should I be ashamed before God, whose eyes are everywhere in the world? To this version, Rabbi Huna commented that Joseph also declared, by God, I will not do this wicked thing.
So even idolaters have their moral conscience.
Guess so.
Bernie,
Yeah, go ahead.
Apropos nothing, it's starting to snow here.
right, you got to talk into the
Look to the
microphone.
front.
It's starting to snow here a little bit.
Here too, Bernie.
Rabbi Huna taught that it was not an idol that Joseph had seen, but rather the face of his father, Jacob. In that moment of temptation, just before he was about to sin and commit adultery, Jacob appeared to him and Joseph's passion immediately cooled. Some interpreters speculate that Jacob said to him, do you want to be called an associate of prostitutes?
Uh-oh. All right, so what's going on here? This is the medieval French commentators Tosafot, Rashi's colleagues and grandson, some of them, into a tractate Sota, the tractate in the Talmud, which talks about the testing of a potential adulteress in the Bible. So clearly the sages of the Talmud are very concerned with adultery, very concerned.
I think the box talks about it a lot. I mean, just what we've been saying, but do you want to do the box now or?
Yeah, in a minute, let's get a few more discussion if we can. B or Benita? B? B? Yeah, unmute and you're ready to go.
Yes, I think the stories that we are spending time on in the Torah are moral lessons, and we're included because of that.
Yes.
So they're trying to teach
The lessons in what you
do,
should and should not
what you
do.
should do and what you shouldn't do, and to try to teach you why you should or shouldn't do it, right? Because we're not certainly in Reform Judaism, we're not interested in a long list of rules, just do this, don't do that. You have to, we have to understand why. We have to have a certain moral autonomy that we have to decide that this is right and this is wrong, rather than just saying there are all these rules and we have to follow them all. Steve, comment? Okay. Julie? You're okay too. Okay. All right, Marcia, you can go to the box, page 98, right-hand column.
The vision of Joseph's venerable father appeared to him just as the will of the young man weakened, just as he was about to sin. Potiphar's wife believed she had at last charmed and seduced him. It was then that the sudden vision gave him the strength to control himself, to triumph over his moment of weakness and to conquer his nature. When a child's training and upbringing are such that even if he has long been separated from the family home, and even if he is lost in the midst of licentious surroundings in a faraway country, his father's influence still guides him towards moral victory. Then this training is the ideal Jewish upbringing.
Oh,
I'm gonna put mother in there too. Let's not leave her out.
Yes, thank you.
but it's kind of interesting. So, you know, I mean, a couple of these commentaries have stressed the influence of Joseph's father, Jacob, in this particular case. Who was Joseph's mother?
Jacob.
Rachel?
Right. Why do you think maybe the rabbis are talking if Rachel was a good person?
Bernie didn't like her.
Oh, it's Rebecca that I didn't like.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no, Rebecca's a much more devious. But what do you think of Rachel?
I don't think we ever agreed on whether she was complicit in the original duplicity to get her sister married off first
That's what
a
I,
couple of weeks ago.
Right, right.
But you know, there appeared to be some, you know, somebody had to be cooperating with somebody about something there. So she seems to have some degree of involvement, if only reluctant. What's another reason they may rely upon Jacob rather than Rachel for a parent of moral authority? I mean, is Jacob really a paragon of moral virtue? Marcia.
I think it's because they, in those years, it was the father that was the one who was supposed to have been the guiding influence. The patriarch was everything, not so much as the mother, you know.
And today, Riva?
Yeah, I think during that period of time, prostitutes were part of their society. And you see, in even some modern societies, the fathers bring their sons to prostitutes.
But this woman is not a prostitute. She's a high noble woman, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying the fathers play a role in the son's sexual activity.
So the father, part of the father's job in the Talmud, it talks the father's obligated to teach his children to swim. But I guess in some cultures, father is obligated to teach his son how to have sex. I mean, somebody has to teach you something, I guess, but.
Well, the rabbis talk about it so much, I think they get the idea.
I can't believe we're going down this road.
Did you get pride?
It's part of the
I mean, they're
subject.
pretty focused, you know?
It's true. I mean, there's a lot of discussions about it, but there's a lot of concern with allowing sexuality to run wild and without limitation. I mean, they're very concerned with limiting it. And there were various groups throughout Jewish history who rebelled against that, most notably the Shabtai Tzvi Messianic movement in Turkey about 300 years ago, where they, rejected Jewish law, and they said that, and then that led into the Jacob Frank movement in Poland, and that the part of it was having orgies and And that was considered part of their religious rituals. So, so that's clearly part of the rebellion against rabbinic authority had to do with the sexual rules. But do these sexual rules serve
The
a
screen is a
function?
little open.
I'm sorry, B? Do these sexual rules that the rabbis have in the Talmud serve a function? And if so, what's that function? Marcia or Riva?
Well, I imagine that they're trying, first of all, to keep the Israeli tribe pure, if you will, and not get involved with these factions. And also, well, it's just a moral rule. That's all I would imagine, yeah.
So it's just part of basic morality to keep sexual activity to a minimum.
Well, to where it appropriately belongs.
And where does it appropriately belong?
Within the marriage.
Only.
Within the marriage.
Riva, Pam, Lorraine, Bernie, and then Pam.
And yet, it's mentioned a little earlier about, I think it was Tamar and Reuben, how she tempted him, and he apparently there was common practice there to go to prostitutes.
Yeah, it seemed pretty widespread. And so, but you need any society that has rigid expectations has to have some sort of an outlet. Otherwise, you risk having a big explosion. So they kind of needed a backdoor to allow people to blow off a little steam, I guess.
Are you approving then of this prostitution?
I'm just pointing out certain societal facts, Marcia. You're making me now blush. Pam, and then Marcia, and then Bonnie, and then Bert, if you want to.
It could be a fundraiser.
Or the next course.
I need a little assistance here from some of the men.
My point is, it's just ironic to me that all this biblical, with the wives, because at least since medieval times,
Oh, that's sweet. Very nice.
Judaism
Have
has
fun. Love you,
marriage.
bye.
I'm sorry.
There's somebody talking.
I'm sorry, Lorraine, we couldn't hear Pam.
It just seems ironic after all this biblical, stuff going on that at least I know since medieval times, Judaism, marriage has been stipulated. And, and this whole concept of, exactly who you marry and there's nobody else in your marriage. And it just seems so different from our biblical, starting point to what Judaism became. And still today marriage is very regulated.
And I mean, very important for all sorts of reasons. Okay, who was next?
You said me, but I didn't have my hand up. I think it's
Okay.
Bert, I think.
Bert?
No.
You're not going to give me a little support here, Bert? Bonnie.
Okay, for the purpose of a father taking his son to a prostitute. Now, I'm not sure if part of that reason was now my son is a man because he has had sex with a female. But on the other hand, the daughters are lectured against having sex until you are married. And that seems really unfair that young boys would be encouraged by their father, to have sex, to go to a prostitute. But yet the daughters, I mean, heaven forbid if they had sex out of marriage, you know, they would be the topic of the gossip in the community. And that just seems very unfair because females have the same urges as men. In other words, girls have the same urges as boys. But yet the girls, it's like, well, you just gotta, not think about it, take up knitting, go do this, go do that. But boys are, we're gonna take you, we're gonna get that taken care of and go to a prostitute and.
Does this story affect, from this specific story, Bonnie, do you think it's chauvinist, or, the fact that Potiphar's wife is chasing Joseph is kind of a modern thing, it's not, doesn't portray the woman as passive.
Right.
So is it a more modern presentation of the roles of men and women?
Well, you could say in that specific case that it was sexual chemistry between the two. Perhaps, I don't know, rather than, she was married, so obviously she was sexually knowledgeable.
Cooking some regular rice.
I don't know. I don't think I can answer that right. I know what I'm trying to say, but it's not coming out.
No, I think you've made a point, and but I think in this particular story, women come off as in a fairly modern way,
Well, one woman does.
right, and that's the particular story we're looking at.
Yeah, right.
Riva, Marcia, anyone else? Okay, Riva, Marcia.
Yeah, I think the focus is on the man and his response to being, what's the word for it?
Enticed.
Enticed is the perfect word. Thank you, Babette. By an attractive woman. I think that's a big variable, and that's the focus of the discussion, at least in the text.
And I guess now there's kind of like in the past, there was this dichotomy between women that they were either viewed of as virgins or whores, right? Is there such a thing where there was nothing in the middle?
Right.
So that either you saw all women as virgins or all women whores, or you saw, you had to put each particular woman you met into one of those two categories. There could be nothing in between. And so maybe there's a little bit of that going on here too, that, that there's a desire to classify Potiphar's wife in one of the two in one of the two.
I have a question, actually. Yes. Back then, were young women considered marriageable right around puberty, or did they have to wait a little bit? So, how many were really available?
That's a really hard question. I don't know.
They're focusing, these rabbis, they're focusing on sex quite a bit, but was the average age of a young woman 15, 16? What was it?
That's a good question. And obviously we're talking about a biblical story that's set in Egypt before the Exodus. So the story is set in about, 1800 BCE. The rabbis that you're referring to are 200 CE, which is really literally 2000 years later. So, there was a wide variety of practices over that 2000 year period. But exactly what was the age of marriage at any given point, I'd have to try to research it.
Yes, you didn't have to be a college graduate,
It's sort of a Cyperless kind of question, and it's not easy, but I think you could certainly say that it was expected that people would marry, especially in the higher, socioeconomic groups, that that they would keep a really close eye on the girls in particular and marry them off, carefully and reasonably young. But whether reasonably young is 12 or 13 or 15 or 16 or 18 and 19, very hard to say. Bert,
My grandmother was 13.
your grandmother was 13,
13.
seriously?
Wow.
She married a cousin who was 13 also.
Whoa, where was this?
Poland.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just, off topic, public service announcement, Ahmed Arbery, all three guilty.
Uh,
The jury just came out.
Good,
Off topic.
good.
Okay. Now,
Sorry, the two guys that killed this young man, the jury, the verdict is they are guilty. Is that right?
I heard all three. That's
Oh,
the news
I'm
I
very
get.
happy to hear that. That is good.
There is justice.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
now back to your grandmother and grandfather. They married at age 13. Under what circumstances?
They were just, I got a whole story how they met, the shidduch done and everything. But we did find my grandfather's travel papers on the ship that he came over to Ellis Island, and him and Mrs. Nussbaum came over in 1911. But it turns out grandma didn't come over 2 years later. She stayed back with two kids. So I don't know who he brought over with him, but the manifest just said Mr. and Mrs. Nussbaum.
Oh, he came over with a woman, but it wasn't his wife.
It wasn't his wife. It turns out it wasn't his wife.
That's not uncommon.
He got busted 100 years later on the internet.
Well, I mean, it's a scandal, but he's not around to explain himself, right? I'm sure
Right.
there's an innocent explanation.
Oh, there's a book in
Oh,
this.
sure. Oh, sure.
Now,
But I don't think that young boys were taken to prostitutes. I don't think boys were pushed into sex. It might have been not look the same as a man and a woman, premarital sex. But I don't see anywhere where it said send the boys off to go be with women.
I had a couple of friends from Brazil, and they were telling me that when they hit puberty, they had sex. They had all these females, house people working in their house. They were very rich families, and they had sex with their cleaning ladies when they were 12 and 13. And that was, they said, very standard among that social group.
Well, I'm just talking about in Jewish tradition or in Torah and everything. I don't see anywhere where it's saying that they're enticing the boys to.
Well, there's a bunch of stories in the Talmud. I mean, Bernie is correct, and some others here said that there are a lot of stories about this sort of thing. The rabbi that goes to a prostitute, and then his seat, as he's taking off his clothes, his seat hit him in the face. And he says, whoops, this really wasn't a good idea. And he gets.
There was a story of how many chickens died on the wedding night before the wedding. You know that story?
No.
Where the woman would have to go in and there was a man who had to examine her, make sure she was a virgin.
Oh.
And he would come outside with a bloody sheet to show everybody she was a virgin. And they said many chickens died that night.
We get it.
Okay. All right.
Oh my. Okay, Marcia.
Well, that's what I was going, one of the comments I was going to say, women were, and to this day in many cultures, expected to be virgins when they go into marriage. Well, men were not. It's supposed to be an honor to be experienced, I suppose, for the men, but the women are expected to be virgins. And that's very common.
Right. I mean, Bonnie objected to this, strongly on egalitarian grounds. And we certainly understand her objection, but, we're talking about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. So you're just not going to get that. So that's just not the way people thought back then. But this particular story seems to flip it around, where the woman is the sexual aggressor, which seems rather modern in a certain sense. Riva.
Yeah, I was just thinking in a lot of other societies, I too would, my familiarity is with mostly South America, that women who were servants were very often considered available to certainly the men in the house. And that was very, very common. And what I saw happen, and I was next door, and not in Brazil, but in Paraguay, the maids would get pregnant, and the women and the wife in the house would fire her.
For getting pregnant with her husband's baby.
Right, and that was a very common event.
Well, it happened with Sarah and Abraham too.
Right. Right. So, B.
Well, this whole conversation on virginity isn't 2,000 years ago, because my parents expected I would be. And I was watched very closely and didn't like that very much at all. I couldn't go here, I couldn't go there, I couldn't go to graduate school out of town, because you know why girls leave, and it's not going to happen.
So they were more worried about controlling B and keeping her close at hand than about her intellectual interests or her, cultural exposure. Bernie.
I think that there's a fair amount of, even today, of this difference in attitude. You know, that's my boy, and not with my daughter, you don't.
Right.
But things have shifted a lot in the last few years. I mean, a lot. All right, who'd like to read page 98 on the right side? We can do the box. Pam?
Okay, where are we starting here?
Do as Joseph did.
Joseph's moral victory.
Okay,
We did that, didn't we?
no, we did that, we did the top.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Do as Joseph did. I don't think we did that yet, did we?
okay.
Do as Joseph did. When someone tries to talk you into sinning, the first thing you must do is refuse without going into details or engaging in debate on the reasons for your refusal. Only after having made it clear that you refuse to sin may you recite reasons for refusing. Do as Joseph did. He told her no, then gave her the reasons. Look, for me here, my master gives no thought to anything in this house, and all that he owns, he has placed in my hands. He wields no more authority in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except yourself, since you are his wife. Then, how then could I do this most wicked thing and sin before God? Keep going.
No, stop there. So what do you think? You first have to say, okay, I say, Nan, I want to work with you to steal the entire stock of cheesecakes out of Cheesecake Factory. And you just go in and faint, just go into their lobby and faint, and everybody will run to you, and I'll steal all the cheesecakes, and then we'll split them 50-50. So her response should be first to say,
No.
No.
and she can say, Rabbi, I know the reasons are.
It's not on my Weight Watcher plan.
All right. What do
Cameras
you
everywhere.
So what do you think about that? First, if somebody makes you an offer to, commit a crime, do a bad thing, you don't start debating them. You first say no.
No.
Yeah.
And why? Why is that so important? What's the reasoning behind
It's the morality of it.
Yeah.
It's just wrong.
It
And
establishes this baseline. That's the baseline right there.
So you want to make it clear to the other person that you're not considering this, that, you'll explain to them why robbing the bank is wrong, but you first want to make clear that this is not on the table.
Yeah.
You're not considering robbing the bank. It's absolutely out of the question. All right.
Yeah.
So everybody agrees this is not controversial at all.
Right.
And
Yes.
then after you've made it clear that this is not in your world, then you can say, here's the 16 reasons why robbing a bank is a bad idea. It's immoral, it's unethical, and it's just a bad idea. Okay, okay. We can continue at the bottom of the page.
Okay, most of our commentators, it seems, conclude that Joseph came to his moral senses at the very last moment. Potiphar's wife offered powerful temptations. She was beautiful, alone, and anxious to make love to him. He was flattered, perhaps infatuated by her. He nearly gave in to her flirtations and proposition. Yet, he was about to sleep with her. His loyalty to Potiphar, to moral traditions that his father Jacob had taught him, and to God, all convinced Joseph to tell her, how could I do this most wicked thing and sin before God? Like Judah's brother, Joseph grows and matures in his ethical sensitivity and the ability to act justly. From the spoiled youngest son who lies about his brothers to win the attentions and affections of his father, Joseph becomes a person of loyalty and praiseworthy ethical behavior.
All right, but what is ironic here, what is just totally ironic, is that he gets in trouble for doing the right thing. He's worried, and we're worried that if he sleeps with this woman, this is adultery, he's going to get caught and he's going to get in trouble. So he refuses. He takes the moral high road. And what happens? He gets in even bigger trouble. So there's, and this is the same boy who used to lie and got his brothers into trouble. And that seems to do good. You know, he got the affections of his father that way. So when he lied and cheated and told bad stories, he benefited. Now that he's trying to be ethical and upright and non-adulterous, he gets into trouble. What is this story telling us? This is totally unjust. Poor Joseph. He's maturing morally and he's getting thrown into prison for his efforts.
Can't win.
Riva.
I think we all know the expression that no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah.
And I think the point here is that you have to look to a higher value or higher level of ethics to assess what is going on.
What does that mean?
Okay, I'm right in over my head. I think sometimes at a superficial level, we feel as if we're being punished for doing good things, and that we have to have a strong ethical sense of what's right and wrong that trumps the moment.
So even though he's thrown in prison, it was the right thing to do. You shouldn't expect to be rewarded for, this is coming into, ethics of the sages. We discussed that in our third week there. There was a Mishnah about this. You shouldn't expect to be rewarded for good deeds. You should expect to be punished. No good deed goes unpunished, but you should do the good deed anyway.
Right.
That's a really sort of pessimistic approach to life. So I should be good, but I should expect to be punished for being good.
Well, I think when we take it a little more subtly, we realize that sometimes you get punished for doing good, but not all of the time.
So I should do good and I should expect to get punished some of the time.
Yeah, I would go with
That's
that.
kind of a Jewish, I think that's sort of a Jewish tenet. You do good, and sometimes it works for you and sometimes it doesn't, but you still should do good.
Right.
I think most Americans want to do what's going to improve their lives. They don't care about good or bad. They want to improve their lives, and they would hope that what improves their lives is going to be judged favorably. Bernie, Babette, Dee, Marcia, and then Steve.
to unmute. Part of it is, I'm sorry, Jewish guilt. Because when you knowingly do something wrong, you're gonna feel horrible about it after the fact. And sometimes it's just not worth it. I mean, not everything is going to be, a momentous decision of right and wrong, but the little things of right and wrong, when you're doing the right thing and when you're doing the wrong thing, and walking around with the guilt of having been morally wrong is not worth it. I'm
So
sorry.
getting thrown into prison for doing the right thing is pretty extreme, right?
Well, yes, it's very extreme. This was an extreme
I
version.
mean, he could have died in prison. There's dysentery and there's rats and there's bugs and there's.
Yeah, I guess God watched over him. What can I tell you? So in the end, he winds up being the most powerful prince in Egypt. So, I mean, but it's living with yourself too.
And then his descendants end up being slaves. All right, up and down. Steve.
Well, again, we have to discuss his guilt in even thinking about going through with the process. Okay, and I think it just helped his moral character even more for doing the right thing, even though he had to go to prison. But look what happened after he went to prison. He had his dreams. Pharaoh listened to his dreams, and then look what happened. He became a high authority in Egypt.
Okay, yes, so he was rewarded in the end. So you shouldn't look at what happens to you 6 hours after you do something. You have to look 20 years down the road. Okay.
The point is that, you're looking at the first, maybe 2, 3, 5 days after you were thrown into prison, then you start to think to yourself, okay, I did the right thing, even though I'm being punished. I look for God's guidance for the future.
Okay. Dee?
I was just listening to Steve, and there's an old cliche that I've always thought about, and it's God works in mysterious ways. So in the end, like we know, he did become a prince, and his dreams became real. So I guess sometimes there's a sacrifice in a choice, and he made that sacrifice, and he did go to prison. But in the end, his sacrifice somehow became his vision of his dream, and he went on in life as a successful man. So God works in mysterious ways.
Okay. Pam, you want to finish up the end of this?
Okay.
Page just 99 on the left.
For his decision, Joseph is called the Zaddik, a righteous person. It is a title he earns. He is not born to it. He becomes a righteous person through his struggle with temptations, greed, and with selfishness. His achievement marks a turning point in his life. Although Potiphar throws him in jail, Joseph's loyalty and morality are ultimately rewarded. First, he is given special privileges by the warden. Later, Pharaoh appoints him as the most powerful prince in Egypt.
All right, so this is kind of referring indirectly to what I've been arguing for a long time, that Jewish character development is perhaps the most important subject that Reform Judaism can teach in a temple context. And, hopefully we can set something like that up someday. And where we can talk about different character traits and look at the nuances of each of those traits. And, and that's what they're saying that happened to Joseph, that he started out as kind of a spoiled kid who was lying about his brothers and trying to curry favor with his father. And over the course of his life, he became a more mature adult. He was able to deal with his selfishness, his greed, his temptations. You know, these are things I guess we all have to some degree, and become a more serious person. And that worked out, I guess, to some degree. Pam.
What I like is all these people who are matriarchs and patriarchs or almost patriarchs, they're all flawed people who end up doing the right thing or being a righteous person in general, and gives us a thought of, you know, of what we should be. Even though we're flawed, there's a leadership that they're showing us.
And Joseph is, even though he's not a patriarch, he certainly shows these flaws. We have a minute, so maybe Bert and Julie, you can just tell us a little more about yourselves. And are you in Arizona?
Yes.
Yeah, we're here for the winter.
Where?
We're up in Trilogy, in Estancia.
Do we have any Trilogy people here this morning?
Have any what?
No, nobody's here from Trilogy. How many people are Sun City? How many people are Buckeye? How many people are Peoria? How many people are Colorado? How many people are Glendale?
Sun City Grand.
Sun City Grand? How many people? Surprise. Okay. So you're in Trilogy?
Yeah. And we're very involved in our synagogue back home.
Which is which?
It's called Anshe Tikva. A small we belonged to a big congregation for many years. The kids all went through school, and then we left for a smaller synagogue because we really liked the rabbi, and we were building a Jewish recovery home in Chicago, modeled after Beit Tshuva in Los Angeles. So we're just getting going with that. We just got a big donation to get it going, and we enjoy Torah study, adult learning back home, and we generally, before pandemic, we're going service all the time on a regular basis, and we came last Friday night, and I like the idea of everybody has to show a vaccination card. I felt very,
Yeah, that was great.
I felt very safe, and very warm, welcoming people. And
Yeah, everybody was so friendly. We really loved it.
and we enjoyed class, and we will see you Friday night, and we will talk to membership committee and see what there is as far as snowbird memberships.
Yeah.
Next year, you'll come and stay at Sun City Grand.
So did you buy a place in Trilogy or you're renting?
Yeah, no, we bought a place April of 20.
And do you know the Maltashes? They're in Trilogy.
What?
Maltash, Barry and Claire.
I don't know them. We joined a group called the Shalom Club here. It's about 140 member family.
We did meet them there last
Oh,
week.
we met them at service. We met them at service, yes.
Very
Yes.
nice.
Well, welcome.
Welcome, yes.
Thank you.
And Beit Tshuva in Los Angeles it's like partly a synagogue and partly a recovery center for people with addictions, alcoholism,
People in
and other
recovery.
addictions.
120 bed facility. Yeah, they have a 120 bed facility there. We're going to start off with an 8-bed facility to get going.
My girlfriend sent her
Yeah,
son to that in LA, that synagogue. She's
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Did it help?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the rabbi
Yeah.
was an addict.
The rabbi there.
Yeah, that's what she told me, that the rabbi actually was a reformed, or
The rabbi there, he was not.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
in here.
Say again.
I'm not sure what you said. The
Okay.
rabbi there, I know he was a drug addict, and he was a felon. He spent time in prison.
Right.
And when he came out, he said, I know all the lies everybody tells me. I know all the BS. So he's a character, Rabbi Mark.
Okay, well, over to you, Steve.
Okay, we're running a little early, but that's okay. We have other things to do, get ready for Thanksgiving and all that good stuff. Let's conclude then with the blessing after the Torah study. Baruch atah
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
melech haolam,
asher notanu
Torah, amen.
b'chayei
Olam
olam
Natan
Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah Adonai,
Noteinu
Eloheinu Torah.
Blessed are
Blessed is
you,
Adonai, our God,
ruler of
ruler of
the
the universe,
who has given
has
us
given us teaching of truth,
implanted
and
within us
within us
eternal life.
eternal life.
Blessed is
Blessed is
Adonai,
Adonai,
giver of
giver of
the
the Torah.
Amen. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you.
you
And
too, Steve.
we'll talk to you everyone soon.
Hope to see
Okay.
many of you on
Hey.
Friday of Shabbat services.
Yes. And Bert, nice
Happy
meeting you,
Thanksgiving,
Julie.
everyone.
Yes,
Thank
happy
you.
Steve, I'm gonna call you right now.
See you Shabbos.
Okay,
Steve, don't hang up yet. Well, he went away. I need.
I'm here.
Happy Thanksgiving to
Okay.
all.
Happy
Thank
Thanksgiving.
And to you, babe.
Rabbi, I think
Bye-bye.
Marcia wanted to talk to me first.
But
So,
if the rabbis can stay on for that.
okay,
Yeah. Okay, I received a call yesterday from Larry Gorlick about Kavod Awards. And I
Okay.
said, yes, I was going to call him about it. Lorraine, this is just about the Kavod committee stuff. So
Oh, so I'm leaving. Bye.
bye-bye, sweetie. Have a
Bye.
wonderful holiday.
Steve,
Thank you too.
Steve, do you
And,
want to stop the recording before we start?
okay, got it.
Okay, thank you.